Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Chhoda and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. Folks, for the first time ever, I'm going to give you some behind the scenes information about the birth of the $1.9 trillion package. Folks, you're going to hear some never before released information, and a lot of credit for this goes to Phil Mattingly from CNN. On your screen, you'll see an article that was published on CNN, and we'll provide you with a link to this article in the description section below. The headline of the article reads Building the Big One Behind the Scenes of Biden's $1.9 trillion bet. So, folks, let me give you the highlights. Number one, what happened was as soon as President Biden won the election, they started working feverishly on the $1.9 trillion stimulus package. They worked on it for a couple of months, but the Democrats knew that if John Ossoff, there he is. What's up, John? And Reverend Raphael Warnock, there he is. Hello, Reverend Warnock. If they won the two Senate seats in Georgia, then the Democrats would be able to achieve a majority of their agenda. So they waited and they tried to do whatever they could to make sure the outcome happened. Well, guess what? There was a political earthquake. And the Democrats won both Georgia Senate runoff races. And if you folks have been following my channel, I called the race for both Democrats. I believe it was at 2 o'clock in the morning or something, if you've been following my channel. So the fact that the Democrats won that race allowed President Biden to say, guess what? I'm not budging from the $1.9 trillion. Here's another interesting fact. Usually, whenever a stimulus package is discussed, both sides come to an agreement on the top line number and then they negotiate the other priorities. Guess what President Biden did? President Biden and his team did it the other way around. They built this entire stimulus plan, the massive $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, from the bottom up. So they basically included a lot of their priorities, and then they got the total of $1.9 trillion a couple of weeks before they decided to make the whole thing public and make the $1.9 trillion plan public. So the fact that the $1.9 trillion number was announced, they didn't just come up with that and say, hey, let's use that as an opening salvo, an opening negotiating tactic, which, by the way, is what has been done in the past. Because in any negotiation, one side opens with their high offer, the other side says, nah, 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 and both sides meet in the middle. President Biden did it very differently. They essentially added all their priorities. They came to a $1.9 trillion top line number, and they said, we are not budging on the $1.9 trillion top line number. We are not budging. That is our first offer. That is our final offer. And if the Republicans don't get on board, because the political earthquake happened and because we have Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, we're going to get it done through budget reconciliation. Now, does this mean that President Biden is completely going to go it alone? Not quite. He is open to making some adjustments to the stimulus, such as potentially further targeting, which it looks like will not happen, but may happen. And there have been some adjustments made to the unemployment benefits as well. If you look at the campaign website of then candidate Biden, President Biden actually said that he was going to push for $600 a week in unemployment benefits for as long as it took. But then the most recent information from the House Ways and Means Committee says, oh, we'll do $400 a week until the 29th of August, which is quite interesting. So, folks, there's usually a difference between what candidates say and what ends up happening. But in this video, I want to highlight that President-elect Biden started creating the roadmap, if you will, for the $1.9 trillion stimulus package with the intention to make a few small adjustments, but with the intention not to budge at all on the top line number, which is very unusual in a stimulus negotiation of this size. Folks, the $2.2 trillion CARES Act a year ago was massive. This $1.9 trillion stimulus package is second in size to the CARES Act. So this is a massive stimulus package. And it's very clear that President Biden is simply not going to negotiate the top line number. He has already made it clear he's not going to negotiate the size of the $1,400 stimulus check. So a very bold strategy towards stimulus negotiations. Now, folks, this is a very important part of this article. Again, full credit to CNN and Phil Mattingly for this reporting. I'll provide you with a link to this article in the description section below. I'm going to quote from the article. As the plan came together, administration officials said that one priority remained clear: President Biden didn't just want a short term infusion of stimulus with patches and temporary extensions to various aid provisions to keep the economy afloat for a few months. He wanted to lock in long term aid and investment. In other words, President Biden wants to do something big, wants to do something bold, wants to do it now while he has that surge of popularity, the honeymoon phase, if you will, that we all have with President Biden right now. I'm sure that they're going to be jaded, unhappy people a year or two from now. But guess what? That's going to happen with any administration. So enough money, the president wanted enough money not just to pull the US out of the pandemic, but to give it the fuel for massive future expansion. It marked a fundamentally different approach from congressional Republicans, one that would define negotiations destined for failure. In other words, if President Biden and the Democrats have made up their mind, the Republicans pretty much have no say in it. That is basically what's being implied. Senate Republicans view tens of billions of dollars in unspent funds from past relief packages and an economic picture that showed signs of recovery once vaccines were deployed as a reason to carefully target any new aid. By the way, the conservative Democrat from West Virginia, there he is. What's up, Joe? That's Joe Manchin. Also wanted targeting of stimulus, but President Biden basically said, nah, we're going to do what I want to do. And folks, here's something important. Shortly before Christmas, when then former President Trump, was threatening not to sign the $900 billion package unless there were $2,000 stimulus checks. Keep in mind that that did not end up happening because the Republican Senate were like, meh, we're not going to do that. And remember, at that time, we had the then Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. He basically wasn't going to do $2,000 stimulus checks. No chance. By the way, if the Senate Majority Leader was not Chuck Schumer and was Mitch McConnell, then we would not even be having this discussion. There would be no $1.9 trillion stimulus. You know that, I know that, and I think we can all agree to that. So what happened was that when former President Trump wanted the $2,000 stimulus checks, and by the way, he didn't get them, what happened was then President-elect Biden seized on that and said, yes, we need to do $2,000 stimulus checks. And he actually used that as a rallying cry, as a campaign strategy to help, you know who I'm talking about, Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock get elected. So what could have been a massive victory for the Republicans essentially backfired on the Republicans and allowed then President-elect Biden help Democrats regain control of the Senate and then push for the $2,000 stimulus checks and claim credit for the whole thing. In fact, here's a quote on your screen from President-elect Joe Biden at that time. He said, if you send John and the Reverend to Washington, these $2,000 checks will go out the door. He said that on a campaign stop to Atlanta the day before the runoff elections. And while all this was happening, there was some frustration, some concerns with the vaccine rollout. The vaccine distribution wasn't as well planned as the Biden administration wanted, which further reinforced the position from the Biden administration to push for a large stimulus. And here's one final thing, folks. The Biden administration had already made up their mind about the $1.9 trillion stimulus. In fact, about 10 days ago, when many senior Republicans, 10 Republican senators, met with President Biden. They actually met with President Biden before Democratic senators met with him in the White House. They felt that it was a good meeting. They felt very confident about it. In fact, Senator Susan Collins from Maine said, I think it was an excellent meeting and we're very appreciative that as his first official meeting in the Oval Office, the president chose to spend so much time with us in a very frank and useful discussion. So here you have this kumbaya moment with the Republicans, and within an hour of that meeting, the White House basically released a statement saying, nah, we're going to stick with the $1.9 trillion. So folks, as far as the Biden administration is concerned, this is a game in which the rules are already set and the decision, the outcome has already been decided. The Republicans can complain all they want, but it's very clear that President Biden is going to get it done. He has the support of House Speaker Pelosi. He has the support of the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. And most importantly, he has the crucial support of the two new Democratic senators from Georgia, which give the Democrats the majority control in the Senate with a razor-thin margin. They cannot afford to lose a single United States senator, and that includes Joe Manchin from West Virginia. And I think they've done enough to get him leaning their way, despite some of his beliefs, which include that the targeting of the stimulus checks need to happen and that the minimum wage should be $11 an hour, not $15 an hour. Whether you agree with Senator Manchin or not, that's your decision. But this video was intended to highlight the birth, the shaping, and the eventual outcome of the $1.9 trillion stimulus package. I believe a version of it will happen before the March 14 deadline that is coming up in a few weeks. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something new, please click like, please subscribe, please enable notifications. That would mean a lot to me. That really helps out the YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Thank you. Take care. Bye.